And a very good evening, everybody, and welcome to another of our Saturday evening programs where we explore all different aspects of spiritualism, philosophy, religion, and different understandings. We've got a really smashing gentleman on tonight. Stephen, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Laurie. It's nice to be back. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it was absolutely wonderful. Stephen was with us under another guise where we had an evening of the Green Spirit organisation. And he's coming back tonight to share his memories and times with Glynn Edwards. So we're really looking forward to that. So I don't know where to start, Stephen. Quite frankly, your knowledge is awesome. It's quite scary. It really is. But
It scares me sometimes.
How many years in total were you in contact with Glynn?
We were kind of best friends, very close friends for 26 years. I first met him in 1989, and then obviously we knew each other, went on holiday every year on retreats, and goodness knows whatever, anything, you name it, we did it together for 26 years,
And over that time, you've built up quite an encyclopedic knowledge of the man, the man behind the name, which is a very rare thing. And it's wonderful that you're going to share that with us tonight. So
yeah.
Sorry, carry on, Stephen.
Yeah, I guess, I guess because I wrote books with him as well, and edited books for him, that gives you a bit more sort of in depth. It's rather like if you're studying something, or write about something, you kind of get to know a bit more about it, don't you? But yeah, and I think there's also a difference, I guess I should stress a bit. There's a difference between being kind of best friends with someone than just being a kind of student-teacher relationship, of course. You've got a very different perspective of a person, of course.
Very, very true. Something I've been a big exponent of recently, talking to people. We know each other on different levels, don't we? We know you as father, brother, sister, mother, and there must be millions of images of us out there to other people, how they know us. But when a friendship link, you really do connect. You really get that in depth, because in that friendship link, you're exploring all the areas of that person. So that's absolutely wonderful.
Yes, I think, that's the thing in a way is who is it? The Irish writer who wrote the book about spiritual friendship. There's that thing of where you're sharing things very deeply with each other and questioning and challenging, and I mean, we didn't agree on everything, and that's how it should be too. We're all individuals, and Glynn had his perspectives and so did I, but we also had vast areas of common ground, or things where we kind of thought things through together and questioned and got answers from each other in a way.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And it is good when we don't always agree, because and when you've got a good, strong friendship bond, you can talk about these things and discuss and dissect and try to understand rather than, somebody just throws in a glib comment against something you've been doing. You just tend, well, I do. You just tend to get a little bit crabby.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's, I think that's what a healthy friendship's about, isn't it? It's you kind of do sometimes question the other person, and and we all say silly things sometimes as well, and stick our foot in our mouth, and if you got, it's quite handy to have someone there sort of saying, what are you on about? You don't actually believe that, do you? Or whatever, yeah. So yeah, it's that's how it should be in a way, I think. No,
Definitely.
we're not wise 24 hours a day, unfortunately. It'd be lovely if we were, but we're not. We say silly things, we get things wrong, and so on. That's what makes us human,
Very true. I struggle with being wise 1 minute a day, but never mind.
Oh,
Now,
dear.
Stephen, you have got an awesome presentation to share with everybody tonight. So without further ado, I will screen share now your wonderful PowerPoint, which has put mine totally to shame. And
Okay.
let you continue, sir.
Right. Just let me know when it's up because I'm seeing it all the time at the moment. So,
Okay. Right. We are up and running, sir.
brilliant. Thank you, Larry. Okay. So, Glynn Edwards, CSNUs, for those who don't know what that means, it's Certificated Medium of the Spiritual National Union. He was also a celebrant, which meant he could do funerals and weddings and namings and so on, which he enjoyed doing. He didn't do many of them, but he always, he particularly liked namings. He was always in his element, naming babies and things. Yes. So born 17th of August 1949. And sadly passed from our earthly coil on the 31st of May 2015. He actually was christened James Glynn Edwards, but he never used the name, and the family, I don't know why the family named him James, because I think there was an uncle also called James, so to not mix the two up, they ended up calling him Glynn right from the start. So and that's what he preferred to be known by. So there you go. So I've got some points here just to kick off about him, which people might not be aware of. He became a Benedictine monk at 16 years old for 2 years. His mother, who I mentioned a bit shortly, I'll show a photo of, she was Roman Catholic. And I guess, like lots of Roman Catholic mums, they like their sons to be Catholic priests, and he was in the priesthood for 2 years. But it became very apparent that that wasn't for him. There had been phenomena, apparently, even when he was a child in a crib. Things got placed in the crib, and which no one knew how they got there. And when he went to church and was at school, he used to see the statues talking to him and all sorts of things. And his mum sort of said, "Don't tell the vicar." And obviously, when he went into into a monastery, that kind of contemplative practice just brought these things much more to the fore, and it became very apparent to him and to the main sort of abbot of the monastery that in some ways that his path lied in a different direction, and amazingly, so you think if he was there for 2 years, he left at 18, and then look, gave his first public demonstration of mediumship at 19. You think, wow, in no time he was working. I don't know whether he worked continuously from that point, but I do know that he gave from in his 20s that he worked regularly in his early 20s onwards. So whether that was just a one-off at 19, I don't know. Interestingly, he went into hairdressing. He got trained at Sassoons and came sought after hairdresser. Did Janet Baker, famous opera singer's hair and things like that. He had a woman come in one day, and people were saying, "Oh, this one, next customer, you'll find her a bit strange. She talks to spirit people." And he was instantly interested, found out who she went to, and booked a sitting immediately with a medium under an assumed name. When he knocked on the door, he was greeted saying, "Oh, come on, Glynn. Come in, Glynn. Your sister, your grandmother Sissy's waiting." And gave him remarkable evidence about him, his family and his grandmother. There was a thing when she died, his grandmother, he cut the pockets out of one of her overcoats, and she told him about that as well. It's incredible evidence in a way. So then, as I say, he went on to become internationally regarded as one of the UK's greatest mediums and spiritualism's finest teachers. I had, editors of, spiritualist and psychic papers say to me, no one's really got the knowledge that he has, at that time when he was at his peak and so on. He was very much, recognized for that. So, worked at the Alpha Findlay College a lot, worked sometimes at Spiritualist Association Great Britain. So he's a tutor there, course organizer. I put this in as well, motivational speaker and inspirational orator, because some people, I remember listening to a recording, I couldn't be there when the Alpha Findlay College did a kind of tribute to him at the college a couple of years after, about a year after he's passed. And I was out in the country, I couldn't get back for it. So, but I listened to the service, and someone there was sort of saying, "Well, I just enjoyed listening to him talk. You don't never mind the mediumship. Just as a speaker, he was inspirational." And this is true. He actually ran some courses at the Alpha Findlay College, which had nothing to do with mediumship at all. He did a week on science of mind. Which was started by an American called Ernest Holmes. He did spiritual retreat weekends and things like this, and they were, as I say, it was just as hard to get on those weeks or weekends so they were on his mediumship courses. They were just as popular. So it was very motivational. He had a strong public voice. He did, have some training. He went to an actor for a while who helped him learn to use his voice and so on. But also he was more than 50% deaf on one ear from a child. He couldn't hear at all, and the other ear wasn't 100% by any means. And I often wondered whether that sort of deafness, rather like some people who are deaf, project their voice a bit, don't they? They're a bit kind of louder because they're not hearing the level of their spoken voice. So I wondered sometimes whether that also helped his dynamic sort of public voice. Author on numerous areas of spiritual mediumistic unfoldment. He didn't just write on mediumship, he wrote on other areas as well, which the book's very popular. And the founder of 2 organizations honoring the memory and great work of the medium, the great medium, really, as well. Gordon Higginson, who was president of Spiritualist National Union for about 20 odd years and chairman of the Alpha Findlay College for just as long, and who was a great friend of Glynn's. Reason 2 organizations. The first was mistakenly really set up as a limited company, and we didn't really have, Glynn asked me to be involved to help him set this up, which I was happy to do so for him. We didn't really have the people with accounting sort of skills or time to put in what you need for a limited company. So it soon became apparent this is a wrong move. And so that was stopped, and a much more smaller company was set up by Jean Dixon, who she just ran it as an independent sort of company, and it was much more easier for her to keep on top of all the accounting and the books for that kind of organization. So it wasn't an intentional thing to have 2 organizations. It was more of a practical thing to change to what was more suitable, really. So here we go. Parents, friends, and mentors. Obviously, here we have his parents, Eddie and Vi. As I say, Eddie was Welsh Presbyterian background. Obviously, a name like Glynn Edwards, you're going to have a Welsh connection in there somewhere. And that obviously comes from his father's side. Eddie was a lovely man, always smiling, always happy. And, sadly, both his parents lived longer than Glynn. But obviously they've passed since, but remarkably so, that his parents lived so long. and lived pretty good lives. Vi always, knew how to have a good time, and Eddie was always very kind of content and easygoing, so lovely chap. He was in the army, which meant Glynn, as a young boy, uh, moved around a lot. So they lived in Cyprus, in Egypt, and I can't think where else, but a few, places around the Middle East and so on, Mediterranean area. So I'm sure that must, all these things must have an influence on the person you become. So obviously, people like Jean Matheson was a good friend and a mentor as well. She started to sit for him very early on, in us obviously, which became a very good home circle for him. He was able to develop his skills. She was always very down to earth, and very patient with him. So, her influence and friendship and help can never be underestimated. She put on lots of big demonstrations in the north of England, which would have Glynn and Gordon Higginson demonstrating, as well as others. Every year she ran a weekend which was very popular at Lytham St Anne's in Blackpool, at the Lindham Hotel. So lovely person. And obviously the great Gordon Higginson was a great friend of Glynn's, and he often took people under his wing. And Glynn was one of those people. So Gordon was very much a mentor for Glynn, and they often did lots of big dems together. They worked at the Lindham together a lot, and so on. And let's see, there's obviously many, many, many others, too numerous to mention, but other people like Muriel Tennant worked with Glynn a lot and was a wonderful friend of his. The great Eric Hatton, who became president after Gordon's passing of the SNU. Other people like Jill Harland, another big demonstrator medium, great presence on stage. She had people who know about her, she had a showbiz background. So you can imagine that really helped her in how to present herself publicly in big demonstrations and so on. Good sense of humor, good company. I thought I'd put in Jammu Maharaj, who was more from the yogic background, who became an influence, because anyone who knows Glynn knows he has a very strong interest in Eastern wisdom and so on. And we had some famous Indian singers, very famous in actual fact, on the passing of one of them. Radio Free mentioned he was second only in popularity to Ravi Shankar. Well, and these singers in particular, they recommended this man to us because they knew I lived in the East End of London, and Jammu used to come over twice a year to Ilford, which is literally 20 minutes up the road, and we often went to see him, and there was remarkable experiences we both had with him, with phenomena happening and so on, and as well as kind of meditational experiences we had. We often tried to leave him money, and 9 times out of 10 he was, no, your family, this is this, this, I don't want anything from you. So amazing, really. Yeah, there were obviously other people like Swami Dharmananda Saraswati, who actually Gordon Higginson recommended to Glynn when we were on holiday once in the Lake District with Gordon. And he was saying to Glynn, oh, you should get her along. She knows a lot about energies and so on. And he particularly recommended her because he felt spiritualists themselves didn't, we talk, he sort of said, well, we talk about energies, but we don't really know very much about them in a way of how to build energies like, the sort of yogic people do. And that's why he recommended her and why he had her on his own courses as well. So there you go. So in one of the books, with Glynn. It was a book Glynn approached me to write, The Realms of Wondrous Gifts. I'll talk a bit more about that later if there's time. I asked him a question, which was, who has particularly impressed you and why? And this is the first part of his answer. So first of all, he says Ramana Maharishi, and this nice photo of him there. And he says he's one of many. His central teachings was based around the age-old question, who am I? Which obviously leads to self-inquiry and can help us put aside any doctrines or distractions that inhibit our unfoldment. He goes on, I thought that the bits in Mauve are more, I think, the central points in a way of what he's got to say about them. Anyway, he goes on, out of asking himself this simple question, there arose a natural goodness within him that embraced all people, irrespective of their individual beliefs, theories, or backgrounds. I've also been drawn to the ideals and life of Mahatma Gandhi, so picture of him, who sought a peaceful settlement without violence, as well as the Dalai Lama, photo of him, who has trod a similar path. These two spiritual giants endeavored to live by the principles of their beliefs and have in many ways changed the world in which we live, showing us by example ways that we can truly be and the power of individual and collective non-violent action, which highlights the central tenet of spirituality. So this bit in Mauve, I think, is more central in a way. They have both showed us that the only solution to all the conflicts of human nature is to love and care compassionately for one another, a core teaching that goes back to Jesus, the Hebrew Bible, the Buddha, and many influential yogis and spiritual teachers. He did add a bit more, which is here. There are numerous other people and writers that have inspired me, such as M.P. Pandit, who he points out, who we were both fortunate to meet in India. M.P. Pandit was actually a secretary at the Aurobindo ashram in India. So, and he actually interestingly also mentions and Aurobindo next, and Aurobindo for their practical and integral approaches to development. And I mentioned Ernest Holmes a bit earlier, and Ernest Holmes for his profound common sense about spirituality. I'll mention a bit more about Ernest Holmes in a moment. So I won't mention it on this slide. I'll mention it in a minute. So here we go. So although he mentions those people, interestingly, this particular slide is what I noticed. Books I noticed he returned to again and again from the first sort of time I met him, right up to his transition. When he passed. So first of all, picture of nature, of course. Anybody who listened to Glynn's teachings or read some of his books knows he's got a very strong nature mysticism within his outlook, and I think, sometimes I get some people have sort of said, well, everybody knows there's a nature element in spiritualism. So, well, actually, you might talk about nature, but there's a difference of kind of, seeing that the world isn't a negative place, which I'll also come back to again later, because we both notice in a way, Glynn and I, but some mediums had this idea of as though the world is a dark, place you kind of got to escape from to find the light or whatever. And you think, well, at the most you could say, well, the glass is half full. It's not totally negative. There is much beauty in nature, and there's much beauty in the way people interact with each other and with other life forms, and they care about the earth and so on. This we're not fighting each other and being horrible to each other 24 hours a day. Yes, wars happen and so on, but they're not happening down every street. So he saw nature as also part of the spirit world. And here there's a quote by him from I think this is from one of the books. Which book? Potential Mediumship, I think this is from. I began to notice differences in the way a tree, bush, or flower in the countryside or a town park affected me, to such a degree that when I looked at and reflected upon it, I found myself becoming still within and aware of states of being that are hard to express in words. And, this is showing this element of nature mysticism which he had. I put some symbols here. Now, I put 3 symbols here. There's the Om symbol, which you find in Buddhism and also in Hindu yoga, which, because, as I say, anybody who knew Glynn, he was very much influenced in the yogic teachings and so on, which I'll mention a book or two in a moment. The Buddhist wisdom as well. In later, with this interest more recently in mindfulness, he was also very much also interested what people were saying about that. And what I liked about Glynn is, he would read like the heavy books by some of the sort of Buddhist masters, but he wouldn't think twice about buying, mindfulness for dummies as well, and just because as a teacher, he was always looking at, well, anyone who could put these things across in more layman's terms, more simplistically, so he had a very pragmatic approach. And obviously, Christian wisdom. What I liked about Glynn, although he left the monastery, and I even asked him, did he ever regret leaving the monastery and not perhaps sticking to that path? And he had a straight no. There was no kind of hesitation. He very much felt that the path of mediumship for him was the path he had to take. So there was no regrets. But what I like is a lot of people perhaps leave a tradition like he did. They then have baggage and they're very negative about it, but he wasn't like that at all. He kept an interest in the Christian mystics. He read them all the time. I knew him, not just Catholic mystics or Anglican mystics, but also the Orthodox ones and so on. And and there were various sort of key books and very much interested in progressive Christian thinking and so on. So, which is to be admired. He wasn't just someone, stuck in a box. He was broad and wide, and that's what enriched him and what made his talks and his writing so enriching as well. So what were some of these key books, you may ask? Well, as I say, I've already mentioned Ernest Holmes, very famous for being the writer behind The Science of Mind, which there's now a Science of Mind movement in America. People like Mariam Williamson, I think her name is, and Louise Hay. Lots of people don't realize, although they're kind of more contemporary writers, they are actually Science of Mind ministers. Lots of people don't realize that. And as I say, he did a whole week at the college once, at the Alpha College, just on Science of Mind, and it was packed and people loved it. That was his knowledge of Science of Mind teachings was that great that he could actually run a whole week on it. Incredible, really. He also returned to Silver Birch. I noticed ever since I first met him, right up to the end, he often found, the teachings by him quite good. He was aware there was a slight kind of anti-Christian tinge in some of the books. Interesting, the medium of Silver Birch, Maurice Barbanel's, and it is Jewish, and you wonder sometimes, perhaps is the medium influence in the teachings a bit there? Who knows? But nonetheless, he wasn't someone who thought, oh, I don't like that bit, and so I won't read him again. He would still, find what he found enriching in the writings, and that was enough for him. Right, you've got Satchidananda here. Well, yes, he was a teacher he liked, a yogi he liked, but I put this here in particular because it's the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's a very key text in the yogic sort of teaching world. Interesting, it's in 4 sections, and one section is all about the psychic powers, what they call the siddhis. And Glynn had, goodness knows, he must have had at least a dozen different translations and commentaries on the Yoga Sutras in his home, and he returned to the book again and again and again and again and again. So, very much a big influence. I think he realized the yogic field, as I say, rather like Gordon, they know about energies, they know about building energy. And, and he realized that in mediumship, that's a key point as well. So who else? Gestures of Balance. All the books by Tarfang Tokor. I mean, it's not many. It's about half a dozen, maybe maximum, if that. Gestures of Balance, I think, is his best. I think Glynn would agree is his best one. It was funny. I think it was on the first course Glynn invited me on. He had a Christian who was into Buddhism and yoga, and he had a retired Buddhist teacher from the Buddhist Society. I can't remember which of the two recommended Tarfang Tokor on that course. But straight afterwards, we both made our way to Watkins Books in central London, which is a popular watering hole for both of us, and filled up my car with tons of books, and Gestures of Balance was one of them. And as I say, he returned to Tarfang Tokor's writings again and again and again. So, and notice, what does it say? A guide to awareness, self-healing, and meditation. So, yes, and he is very well respected. So, get it if you're interested. And Autobiography of a Yogi. He was already aware of him before I knew him. As much as he was already aware of people like Silver Birch and Ernest Holmes, of course. But he, I was telling Laurie before we started, I said, I've lost count how many copies I've had of this in my home, because Glynn would often, recommend it to friends of his and lend it to them, and then they wouldn't return it. And he would sort of say, oh, can I borrow your copy? And then he would kind of lose it or whatever. Then sometimes he would buy me a replacement and then borrow the replacement. And then at the moment, to this day, I'm still not sure if I've got this one in my house or not now, and whether Glynn was the last person to borrow it. It's another book. It's a lovely read. Yogananda's teachings are beautiful, but this is obviously his autobiography. He talks about his early teachers and mentors and various sort of phenomena and experience he had with various yogis and so on. So it's a fascinating book. I'm sure most people listening to this talk this evening will be more than aware of his work. So let's get on. Glynn on holiday and spiritual retreat. This, as I say, as a friend of his, so a very different sort of relationship to a student-teacher relationship. A couple of holidays we had when we first got to know Glynn. Gordon Higginson joined us, and our first holiday with Gordon, and Jean Matheson brought him as well and stayed for a few days. We were literally just in a caravan, and it was late. It was sort of October time, late in the year, but we had marvelous weather, and we had a great time, in this very humble holiday caravan. And and I guess lots of people might think we were having seances every night, but it was more about, Glynn and Gordon were just chilling. They were like any other holiday maker. They just needed to rest, unwind, have a laugh, and tell stories and so on. But there was one evening, Gordon shared some fascinating tales about some of the early mediums he'd sat with and the phenomena he witnessed. Like there was one apparently where butterflies would appear in the seance room and things, which were obviously weren't there before. And and he talked about how his technique for building energy and a large demonstration, which was fascinating. And I never heard him publicly talk about that, but he shared it with Glynn and I and Jean Matheson one evening. Glynn, so Gordon, I should say, he loved washing up. I never knew anybody who likes washing up, but he loved it. And I often thought, I think it was just something just very grounding for him. You can imagine, he was working publicly and, lots of demands on him. And I think that thing of just doing something like washing up kind of was just a nice break, from just doing something ordinary, he would sing away and put everything away and dry it all up and so on. Yeah, he was good company, very funny, and so I have fond memories of those holidays. Other places, Glynn, we went on holiday to Granada. There's a picture of where he's got the glasses on his shirt. That's taken at Granada. Which he loved. I thought fascinating, beautiful place if you've ever been. The picture below with him walking away, that's in a Christian yogi ashram. You couldn't stay there, it was for nuns, unfortunately, and I think you had to be a member of the order. But you could visit, but they were lovely people, more than welcoming, and lovely, nice grounds, and very friendly, and like you say, yeah, we actually went for the New Year service on 2010 there, and which was very moving. And they mixed yogic teachings and prayers with Christian teachings, which was interesting. Very interesting approach they had. And picture on the right is actually Glynn in Rome. He asked me if to go along because he wanted to take his mum to Rome. Because she was Catholic and never been to Rome, but she was a bit elderly. I think both his parents were in their 80s then, so he wanted a bit of help with them. So I went along, and that's actually Glynn reading a copy of the Catholic Times, believe it or not. And that was another, and all the years I knew him, he could never walk past a Catholic church without nipping in and getting a copy of the Catholic Times, because he liked to read what they were up to. And if, I told one friend of Glynn's this, and he was actually shocked, but he would do that. But I thought, well, no, it just shows how open-minded he was. As I say, he didn't have baggage about the movement he'd left. And he was still fascinated about what things they were doing, and sometimes there were good articles. He would say to me about people I know, like who I thought were good, like Thomas Berry, who was a kind of green progressive thinker in green spirituality. He was also a Catholic priest. There was a very nice article about him when he'd passed, and also very good one about Olivia Messiaen, who was a Catholic composer who wrote a lot of pieces with bird song mixed in with them. Very avant-garde and sort of modern, but and Glynn would sort of say, "Oh, there's a very good article this week in Catholic Times about Olivia Messiaen and so on. You should read it." So yeah, so interesting. Many sides to this person. Demonstrated now. For those of you who see these two pictures, there's something a bit unusual about them. And most of you who saw Glynn demonstrate will realize, yes, he's on the podium, he's on the platform. And it's kind of seen as a thing you mustn't do. Certainly up at the Arthur Findlay College, getting off the platform is it's like you're burning hell for such a thing or something. Joking, of course. But obviously these are two big demonstrations, and he had to be on the platform. But generally, he would prefer to be walking up and down the aisle, touching people's shoulders as he went along the way, and going up to the person wherever they were in the congregation and just speaking directly to them. very rarely needed a microphone because he had a voice that projected. The big picture here was taken at Derby Assembly Room. So obviously, even Glynn would have needed a microphone for that one. So, projects. He founded these two organizations, the Gordon Higginson Fellowship, and then there was one which a slight adaptation on that name, which was done. And he did a lot of courses under, the Gordon Higginson Fellowship ran, and the other organization at the Seekers Trust in Kent, which is a lovely place. If people are not aware of it, it was founded by a doctor, and I can't remember his name, Dr. Lascelles, was it? And he was a known healer in his time and so on. So there's lots of healing chapels there. You can stay and go on retreat there, or you can just hire out. Sometimes, we just, Glynn would hire out just the main assembly hall and so on. And did lots of courses there with numerous mediums. Eileen Davis worked with him there a lot with him and so on. At Eastbourne, once again, he put on two very mega courses, all to do with lots of physical mediums, which were highly successful. And the big picture is him and Eileen Davis in the main assembly hall at the Seekers Trust. On one of numerous weekends they did. Other things, there's a picture of me there with Glynn, Green Spirit coordinator and interfaith minister Ian Home, and the wonderful, who's also sadly passed now, Dr. Chris Clark, who's a cosmologist and also a Christian. And that course in particular, to show, it wasn't all about mediumship Glynn was interested in. He actually just chaired the day, and the rest of us just put on things to do with green spirituality that day. And Glynn enjoyed it just as much and asked lots of difficult questions like he often liked to do. And it was a good day, good fun day. It was the first nicest day of the year. It was like springtime and the sun came out, and it been miserable and grey up to that point that year. So it was a very auspicious day, lovely day. And obviously other things he's done, lots of recordings and so on, which I'll mention a bit more later, I guess. So a big thing, obviously, writing some books with him. What happened, I had a graphics business in Docklands, and around about the beginning of the 90s, where the Apple Macs came in, and said to Glynn, well, if you want to write a book, Glynn, that's the time. The technology's made it much more easy to do these things. It's quite so big and expensive and time consuming in a way. But having said that, this book took 8 years to come out, and there's a story behind that. First of all, so I approached him and sort of said, well, we got the Apple Macs at work. If you want to put together a book or whatever, I can type it up for you. And he straight away turned around and said, yeah, that'd be good. Why don't you write it with me? And I thought, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. And I thought, well, what am I going to write about? So it was very much a joint effort. I actually sat down one day and worked out roughly who did what, and there's lots of joint chapters, or chapters where I heavily edited what he did, or he heavily edited what I did, or we made suggestions and so on. And it is really pretty much 50-50 split on what was done. And but at first neither of us were really writers, and even our best friend saw the early draft and sort of said, well, yeah, the content's there, but it reads like rubbish. It's repetitive, and the etc. The punctuation's terrible, and well, in some ways it's a good job friends tell you these things. So it kind of got left on top of my wardrobe for 2 years, And then Glynn also wrote a lot of chapters or dictated ones as well on a 2-week holiday we had in the New Forest area as well. But it did kind of, it took, we weren't writers, as I say, and it was done in our spare time. So it took a while, maybe about 3 or 4 years in the end to get it finished. Some chapters amazingly just came. They just flowed onto the page. Yeah, it's interesting in a way. And then I kind of myself, I did my business went bust because of 90s recession. And so there was no workaround. So I ended up I thought, oh no, I'll go and do a degree in religious studies. I'm quite interested in what different traditions have to say. So I did that, and that sharpened up my editing skills no end. Then obviously I got to know Swami Dharmananda, one of her yoga students, who was also a writer and a retired editor for Oxford University Press. And she offered to actually give it a look as well. So she helped me knock it into shape. And then when it was actually then finished in a shape which people liked, synchronicity struck, and we got a call from Tony Olson saying, "Oh, I'm scouting for a publisher called Fulsham. They're looking for titles. Would be interested in doing a book, Glynn." And he straight away said, "Well, funny you should say that. Steve and I have just eventually got round to finishing one, which has taken a while." And then the publisher took 2 years to bring it out after accepting it as well. So it was literally from idea to being out an 8-year project. But what's nice about it, I think it's got both of us as younger men writing and the fresh, even when it was originally called Tune Into Your Spiritual Potential. We revamped it, retitled it with a title we liked, not what the publisher liked. In 2011, and in re-looking at it, what I do like the fact that it kind of shows a more vibrant, kind of freshness of younger minds in a way, even though Glynn was by then in his 50s and I was early 40s or something. I don't know, maybe Glynn was late. Trying to think. Yeah, Glynn would have been exactly 50 when it came out, because it was 1999. And so I would have been sort of about, goodness knows, 44 or something. And yeah, so and it became very popular. People liked it. The bestseller at the Alfindley College, amazingly. So it shows you never give up. People might tell you something's rubbish. Don't throw it in the bin. Come back to it, see what can be done with it. I was told it always was a bestseller there. I then, so the original title in a way was the original idea was Glynn's. I asked him, and he had ideas of what we could do. I should mention, when it comes to the middle section, which is more the mediumship stuff, he was very adamant about wanting to start with psychic awareness, very adamant about wanting to then follow it with the aura, because he felt those were key things to mention first. And also that it should be called attunement, that middle section. So the books on the right were more post-mortem. If there's time, I'll mention them later. But the ones on the left, the ones done during Glynn's lifetime. So I had the idea for Spirit Gems, which was more just potted key points about spirituality, which we then sort of unpacked about. The Realms of Wondrous Gifts was Glynn's idea. He very much felt a lot of students he was working with were getting a bit closed-minded, thinking spiritualism had all the answers and should be used as a stick to beat other traditions with, and he wasn't happy about that at all. So he asked me if I would be interested in writing a book which could look at kind of mediumistic, psychic things in different traditions. And I also asked if he'd like to do a conversation section in it as well. And also then I had the idea, sort of, so why don't we put together something just you on mediumship? That's what you're, no medium. It seems strange we haven't got a book solely on that. So we use passages from what he'd done before, plus he put new material as well. So what was his teachings? And, as I say, he was progressive, awakening to evolving in eternal life, unity in diversity, limitless potential, the whole self, the compassionate growth, oneness with the spirit world, awareness, original goodness, co-creativity, nature as an expression of divinity and a part of us, and living by spiritual laws. These can be seen as running as key themes throughout his writings and his recordings and so on. So here's some passages. We live in an evolving universe governed by creative power, divine intelligence. God, which is both masculine and feminine, is the inner essence and cause of all life, the ground of everything and everyone. And this shows in a way how he changed. When I first met him, he was very much about God the Father, but he also then changed and realized, we should be talking more about the feminine aspects of the divine, the creative, compassionate, those sorts of elements and so on. Interestingly, this passage from the Realms book, lots of mediums I notice, they might do talks or write about the beginnings of mediumship. And they often start with the ancient Greeks. Well, that's fine, mentioning the oracle at Delphi. But, before European history, there were indigenous people, of course, thousands of years before the Greeks. So I put this quote in to show that indigenous people and shamans were the first humans to connect with the spirit world, permeating nature, and to communicate with our departed ancestors. Others have looked towards more transcendent areas of spirituality. Now we're seeing God somewhere else or the spirit world somewhere else. Although there are some who have never completely separated themselves from some of the earliest indigenous beliefs and practices, meaning seeing the divine in nature and so on, and here now. There are some who have, which has led to an unhealthy separation between nature and the spirit. All areas need to be included in the search for the one ultimate reality that expresses itself in and through all. Mediumship is an individual experience that never unfolds in exactly the same way for everyone. This is a key teaching of Glynn's. It wasn't about having a method and doing, giving messages the same as everybody else. Find your form of mediumship was his thing. And just as God is continuously creating and life is evolving, we also need to be forever moving forward and be wisely creative in the present. So in other words, it's an unfolding and continuously exploring and so on. There is no end to our involvement and the potential within us. It is only we who limit ourselves with inhibiting beliefs about our spiritual nature and inherent gifts. What can often seem like wrong turns, false starts, or mistakes might discourage us, but invariably these things help us to refine our awareness and lead us to firmer convictions about the paths we must tread. So it's not an easy ride. It can be bumpy, but it's that old thing, isn't it? We often learn more from our mistakes than our successes. It's that kind of philosophy he had, very practical, very realistic. If we accept that life, actually, this is a question I asked him about, some people might see being in touch with the divine okay, but seeing in touch with the spirit world a bit strange. It was a deliberately leading question I asked him, which I thought got a good answer from him. If we accept that life is eternal and there are other realms of existence intertwined with our physical world, then it must surely be a natural step in our evolution to be able to communicate with these other realms and with those who are living on. We need to recognize that there are different ways in which to approach the many faceted dimensions of spirituality and be open to numerous areas that can lead us to healthier states of spiritual being and embrace the allness of what eternal life is about. If we accept there is a part of us that never dies, then we need to integrate this knowledge into our lives, investigate its implications, and establish greater awareness of its reality in our unfoldment. So, it's very much, if you accept this, it comes with implications and it comes with some work, which perhaps some people don't realize. In my own understanding, mediumship is not about seeking to be a particular type of medium. It is a journey and awakening through numerous spheres of activity and experience that assist us in being more openly receptive to infinite positive potential and allowing that potential to surface and shine more purely and unrestrictedly through all that we do and are. There are problems in trying to distinguish too sharply between the inspirational and intuitive knowledge, the psychic, the mediumistic and the spiritual, the prophet and the activist, the mystic and the seer. All have their origins in our being, are an expression of an interactive whole. He wasn't about separating these things, as you can see. Lots of people talk, oh, I work mediumistically, not psychically, and he used to point out, well, everything is actually psychic interpretation. The way you just interpret the physical world is done through your inner psychic world. You symbolically see the world in a certain way, and nobody knows if you see the world in the same way as someone else. And from what people tell us of their experience, it's obviously that people don't. They're kind of got a very different kind of interpretation of how they're interpreting things and so on. So everything's symbolic in a way, language and so on. The subject of mediumistic and psychic awareness is in fact multifaceted, including that when we talk to another person in the physical world, we are in fact communicating with another spirit personality because of the spirit that exists in all people, species and things. This is taking mediumship to a much wider, universal idea in a way. It's like the cosmic Christ or Buddha nature thing of seeing it here now all the time. We must remember that not only our inner senses, mediumistic, psychic and spiritual, but our physical senses, which have wondrously taken millions of years to evolve, are equally valid, as spirituality is not an escape from one world into another, but an inclusion of the whole of life. Life on Mother Earth is not a negative place that we feel we would be only too pleased to escape. Its beauty inspires awe and wonder and has great healing qualities. At its deepest level, the act of mediumship seeks to enhance our daily life and helps us to be of selfless service to others. As we enter into development with an open mind and a willingness to grow into spiritual maturity, which means including the inevitable difficulties and suffering we and others encounter, along with blissful moments of awakening to divinity, we begin to realize that all life is ultimately one, that there is no clear division between set systems of belief or everyday life and spiritual understanding. The underlying teachings of the Spirit are about awakening to the oneness of all life and becoming co-creators with the Spirit and the divine, expressing their creativity. Signs of an authentic spirituality are found in teachings of inclusiveness, equality, acts of compassion, and honoring different beliefs, insights, practices, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender. I feel it is important that we embrace the light that is there in numerous spiritual traditions. I realize that nationality, spiritual background, or beliefs have nothing to do with the phenomena of mediumistic and psychic powers, as they are a natural part of everyone's being and found manifesting in the majority, if not all, of the world's great wisdom and mystical traditions. In various traditions, the universal spirit is described in different ways. In Buddhism, as recognizing ever-present Buddha nature. In Judaism, as Ruach, the spirit and the breath of life. In Hinduism, as the Atman, the spark of divinity in all. And in Christianity, as the divine indwelling and the cosmic Christ. In the course of my development, I've come to realize how our individual nature Sorry, how our individual spirit, nature, the spirit world, and God are continuously creating, and how by participating with this activity, we become co-creators with the creative powers of all life. Realize you are interconnected with everything in nature, that all the powers of creation in the natural world are within you. You are the divine in life and are limitless. Every living thing and species that exists is a part of the spirit world. The natural world is an expression of the divine's creation. And what nature is, we also are, for we are also unique parts of nature and expressions of divinity. Living by spiritual laws means going beyond ordinary laws, taking responsibility for every area of our lives, our thoughts, feelings, and actions, and being respectful of everyone and every form of life with which we come into contact. We may not be able to accomplish this overnight, but it is in the trying that we become more caring, loving, centered, responsible, and empowered spiritual beings. So I realize I'm up for time. So it's up for you now to, I can finish there if you want, Laurie.
No, carry on, because this bit's lovely.
Okay.
And you've got a wonderful radio voice. I'm sat here and I'm really listening away. It's brilliant.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yes. So I was telling Laurie just before we came on live about this. So 2.5 years after Glynn's passing, I had been working overseas a bit, but I came back and I promise you, my kitchen floor does get cleaned. I don't leave it unclean for 2.5 years. But anyway, so people had approached me about writing a book about Glynn, biography or whatever, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. But I eventually decided, well, he didn't really ever want a biography, but maybe a tribute book was the way to go, which friends and family of Glynn seemed to think was a nice thing to do. So I started on that idea, and but I started getting ill, and I didn't quite know what was happening at first. And this is, as I say, 2.5 years on. And then one day I went into my kitchen round about this period. I noticed something on the floor, and I'm a bit short-sighted, as you see, I wear glasses to see the computer. I thought, oh, what's that mark on the floor? So I kind of got dishcloth or something and it bent down and realized it wasn't actually a mark on the floor. What it was a very tiny piece of labradorite crystal, which Glynn had bought the last time I'd been with him in Glastonbury. He was there to do a talk to the Positive Living Group in 2013, and he liked it because if you know labradorite, it has a lovely blue shimmer to it, and it had a lovely shimmer even though it was just a tiny fragment, and he kept it in his wallet. It's said to be good for psychic powers, intuition, and for healing and for energy. And how it got on my kitchen floor because it couldn't have been just sitting there in that position for 2.5 years. I would have brushed it up and swept it away or mopped the floor since then. And it's crazy. And I was it an apple, or was it something which perhaps was somehow got kicked underneath the fridge and somehow loosened it? So I don't want to make speculations, but it was certainly synchronistic. I felt it seemed to me like it was a way of Glynn sending me some healing and some encouragement. I'd started this book and realized I couldn't finish it because my mental powers had gone because of being ill, and I actually almost died one night 6 months later. It was a complication of what should have been a straightforward procedure. And so, it seemed to me to be a message from Glynn, how it got there. So it should have been his wallet. Why wasn't it in his wallet? What does it do in my kitchen? Anyway, I'll leave listeners to decide if that's an apport or just synchronicity. Either way, it blew me away, obviously. And this is much bigger than what it is, of course. It's about a third of that size, you know. Obviously, Glynn's influence continues, and there's the website which I built to remember him, with some extracts, a bit of a biography, some photos, and so on. The Spiritualist Association of Great Britain has also posted many quotations by Glynn this year, and continues to do so. There's a Glynn Edwards Remembered Facebook page as well, and also the Glynn Edwards teaching page as well now, which has been set up with a few things. So there's some teachings obviously on the Remembered website, and obviously on that one as well. Mark Stone, whom lots of you may know, was a fabulous friend and of Glynn's, worked with him a lot. He's also set up this Listening to Spirit, which has lots of Glynn's audio recordings. This year, I brought out ebook versions of all of the books with Glynn. A couple of them were available as ebooks before, but not all of them. So that's there. There's a mid-price version of Reflections with Glynn Edwards. I brought this out last year to coincide with what would have been his 70th birthday. And I was going to do it at a cost price. You know, I didn't really, you know, it was done out of love for him and remembrance of him, using lots of quotes, and as a kind of meditation sort of book. But then the Alpha Finley College and Mark Stone sort of said, no, we'd like to stock it. You'll have to put the price up a bit to cover for your postage or something, you know. So it's more mid-price now rather than rock bottom price, if that helps. So this is the book people approached me about doing. Lots of people did, sort of, because of writing books for him, sort of, well, you do a biography. And so, well, he didn't want that, and I don't really want to go against what he didn't want. So it was suggested, maybe, what about a tributes book where people share some memories and any sort of articles which perhaps haven't been published could go in as well. And so that's what I did. It's sort of half Glynn's unpublished works and half memories people share, very touchingly, and lots of photos, of course, as well. You know, so, and it seems to be popular with people. I put this here because the potential mediumship. So he wrote 2 articles after it came out. So I did expand it, and I did add a biography, a more extensive biography about him after his passing. So and revamped the design of it as well. So literally, it says they redesigned in 2020. So there's lots been done very recently to remember him. And mentioning this one as well, this is the book Glynn particularly wanted for his students, to encourage them to be a bit more accepting and broader minded about other traditions. And I also put in 2 long questions and answer sections where I asked him lots of very difficult questions. One person got very grumpy with the fact that I asked him lots of difficult questions. Well, no, you're meant to ask difficult questions. You know, spirituality is not meant to be comfortable or middle class and, you know, everyone's just agreeing with each other. It's meant to be radical, and Glynn was radical. He was progressive, and, you know, and I think to a certain extent, if you want like the progressive thinking of Glynn, these question and answers one really kind of shows him at his kind of most deep thinking, in a way. Glynn wanted it to be educational, so we always did it at a low price, and now it's actually at cost price, the paperback. And there's even a free ebook version via Smashwords and Barnes and Noble. But Amazon, they wouldn't let us do that. It has to go for a pound for the ebook. So there you go. So that's me. I'm done. Are you still there, Laurie?
Oh, yes. Oh, very, very much so. Hanging on every word. Awesome. Absolutely lovely. That just flowed like a river. That was really interesting, insightful, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a question.
Okay.
Lovely Bev.
Then.
Lovely
Where's
Bev
the
man.
question?
There we go. So bearing in mind what Glynn says about all religions, spiritualism appears to have become exclusive in RE. I think there's a mistype there. What do you feel Glynn would make of all this?
What do you think she means by in RE, in religious education?
I'm not sure.
There's a fair
Yeah,
amount
I
of
think that's a
religion.
become more exclusive in. If you're listening, Bev, could we just have a bit of an expansion on RE? I don't think it is religious education, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
There is a follow-up comment, which
As you feel it should be,
ah,
should encompass all religions. Yeah. I do feel that that Glynn, yes, he didn't see that it should be, rather like other progressive thinkers. Whether I'm Glynn was interested in progressive thinkers of different traditions, and it's rather like Christians. You got people like Marcus Borg and so on, and Matthew Fox and Thomas Berry. It's no longer about an us and them, and we've got the truth and you haven't, and that sort of nonsense anymore. And Glynn was very much like that. He felt we did come across quite known mediums who might turn round to him and say, well, I'm a spiritualist because it's got all the answers. And to a certain extent, and Glynn asked me this, what do you think about that answer? And I said, well, I'd have been happier if they said it makes me ask more questions. If you've got all the answers, you're not going anywhere. You're stuck, and you're a bit of a kind of fundamentalist in a way. And he knew and another quite very well known medium turned around to him and said, I'm only interested in pure spiritualism. And Glynn straight away sort of said, well, what's that? I don't understand what that is. Can you explain it to me? And they couldn't, because nothing comes out of isolation. And things that, if they're going to be relevant for today, they've surely got to be continuously expanding, reflecting, adapting, and changing its perspective to make it relevant for its times in a way. We no longer believe the earth is flat. We no longer believe homosexuals are all damned and going to hell. And it's that kind of thing. It needs to be more all-encompassing. The SAGB, Spiritual Association of Great Britain, interestingly, are very much into faith. They're not, a form of spiritualism which just sees itself as one thing. The SNU sees itself as a kind of you have got some mediums and teachers there who want to see it as being separate from other traditions. It's why there's conflict there, perhaps, for anyone wanting to bring in yoga or Buddhism or Christianity and so on. Yeah, interestingly, Glynn and Gordon Higginson had no problem talking about all these other traditions and mystics and their experiences and so on, practices. I was once told by a very famous medium, if I was interested in other traditions, I should go elsewhere rather than expect to find it in SNU spiritualism, which I find sad in a way. It's you think, well, in this day and age, it's almost that you're out of touch in a way. Let's face it, my neighbors are Muslims and Hindus and Christians, and so do you really want to separate yourself and not connect with people because they've got different views to you? And it's that thing of I've even heard no, it's actually reported back to me once. Someone went to hear quite a very well known and respected teacher, said yes, she was very good, etc. But she did turn around and say, if only everybody else would think like we do. And you thought, well, yeah, kind of, I'm sure lots of fundamentalist Muslims actually do think like that as well. And fundamentalist Christians probably think, if only everybody think like us fundamentalist Christians do. And you think, there's a maturity needed, isn't it? Go beyond that. No, let's live in the real world. No, not everybody's going to believe the same as you. But our differences should be what makes us stronger and makes us grow and kind of puts that grit in the shell to make us kind of be uncomfortable for a while while we kind of work that one out and so on, you know.
Very, very true. My personal thoughts is spiritualism is supplemental to all the world's religions. There are aspects of spiritualism that explain the Torah. There's aspects that explain Christianity. There are aspects of spiritualism within the Quran. It's just there to be seen. And this is a human thing, isn't it? And especially us Brits seem to be top of the league for this at the moment. You know, if you put one thing up, we're going to have 49% of the population saying one thing, 49 saying the other thing, the other 2% really not caring.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
And
what we believe. That's the way it should.
yeah, I knew people who felt that Glynn kind of made it more difficult for him because he was always searching, he was always questioning. I think, oh, if only be happy with the knowledge he has. And you think, well, no, really, what makes Glynn Glynn is that continuous curiosity, that continuous passion, that continuous search to question things. And as I say, he did change position on some of the things he taught, and which I think is only to be expected with anybody who's who's developing. You're rethinking things, and sometimes you're thinking, no, that doesn't quite make sense. I mean, he started, although he was very much born a medium, and people like Gordon Higginson and Gene Harland, it was there, so you get lots of people's, the old adage of, mediums are born, not made. But then he came, when he met people like Swami Dharmananda and some of her students, they weren't interested in mediumship, they were interested in yoga. But what they found when they started doing yoga, they started getting clairvoyant experiences and things, totally unexpectedly. And some of them could have been quite, middle-aged or older, and so it wasn't there at the beginning, like a lot of, you're born, not made. It kind of contradicted that in a way. So he used to teach that, but then changed his position. I thought, well, no, because this is showing that it wasn't there. There were no signs. They weren't even interested in it. But then they kind of got a bit shocked somewhat when all of a sudden they started having, clairvoyant experiences or something. It's quite interesting.
Very true. A very dear friend of mine lives up in the Lake District, is an artist. And spiritualism does not exist. It's all hokum, absolute rubbish. Don't talk about. I don't know what we got in common, but it's really not spiritual anyway. And he's not into it at all. Doesn't acknowledge it. Absolutely fine, and that's fine. I've got no truck with that. And I was talking to him. I said, "How do you get this inspiration then for the pieces that you work on?" Because he's a sculptor. And he said, "Oh, I just go and sit in the forest." And he said, "And just these images come in." And he said, "And then I follow them." And I'm like, "Oh, so there's no such thing as an external influence?" He went, "No." And I'm like, "Okay, if you're happy with your explanation, that's great." I'm not trying to convert you.
Yeah. So this is it, I mean, it's maybe, we could talk about the difference between genius. It's rather like, why was Bach so good, and yet his father was mediocre, and the rest of his family were as well. There's that. It's and even with him, they feel it's more to do with nurture rather than nature. So it's interesting. The potential might be there, but where you go with it, the experiences you have may make a difference in how it comes about and how rich it is.
Yeah. Here's an interesting one from John Fisher. No, I'm not
Oh
aware of
yes.
it. Can you read that all right there, Stephen?
I wonder who Glynn's prime, I think his means spirit guide. I don't know about prime minister, so probably a typo. Prime spirit guide was, and if he would mind if revealed. Yeah, I mean, when I first knew him, there certainly seemed to be different people there with him. I know there was an Irish priest, and I think there was a Greek Orthodox, Orthodox priest as well. Not sure, but then I noticed, the thing is, I didn't see a lot of his public work later in life. I helped him out a lot, at the Seekers Trust, but didn't necessarily go and see what he's up to all the time. But I believe it sounded to me that there were different people working with him later than earlier. So I don't know. I can't really answer that. Truthfully, I can only sort of say people I was aware of when I first met him didn't seem to be mentioned so much in his later years. I don't know why that was, but there you go.
Right, very interesting. There's just something here from Bev that I would like to just bring up. Now, where was that comment? I was going a little bit off track, but it's sitting there and just niggling. Not from you, Bev. Not from you, Bev. It's just what you said, and I understand what you're saying, my darling. She says somewhere that she was told in a. Oh, there we go. She was told that she couldn't join a development class in an SNU church unless I changed my religion. This is what the fundamental energy, I think, was about that first question. So it's quite interesting to get down to these core basics.
Yes.
We don't want to discuss organisations or individual cases or churches.
No.
Bev, I just want to share with you something. Jennifer, I beg your pardon. I just want to share something with you. We've been doing something with the church on collecting food, handouts, clothing, etc. for the homeless. At Christmas time, Paul Church always supports the homeless. This year, our hands are tied. There is an organisation locally that is doing it. They're equipped, they're up and running. So we're supporting them in their endeavours. I took down quite a generous donation the other day, and I'm not saying that to sound big. It was, if I was running it and somebody turned up with it, I would have gone, oh, great, thank you. Unfortunately, I was met with, do you believe in Jesus Christ? The second I'd said, I'm from the Spiritualist Church. I'm just saying that to highlight it's not the religions, it's the individual practices. And if you go somewhere, do you know what? If you find that energy, put it to one side. As you said, Stephen, part of the development, sometimes you just think, well, that's not right. But that is part of our growth and development. What's your thoughts on
that? Yes, I tend to agree. I think it's people, not necessarily the movement, as you say. And I don't really want to get into some sort of criticism of the SNU. I mean, I've not been involved with them for a long time because my interest took me elsewhere, so I don't really know what their stance is, but as I say, the SAGB are more of an interfaith thing. It doesn't matter what faith you are and so on. And I'm sure that's the case with Paul Church. It's a case of, well, if you're more sort of inclusive, then you're welcome. I have heard, things like this. Other people, I've heard stories back from Glynn where people have been put off, they might have had an interest in Sufism and they say, well, that's fine, you can be involved with us, but drop the Sufism thing. And I think that's sad in a way. You think, well, you're just trying to make everybody else the same, surely. And as I say, that wasn't Glynn's teachings on mediumship. It was just, well, find your own uniqueness to it. There was once one person he knew, a student who was doing some healing, which it came out in a very unorthodox way. I'm not saying he did anything strange. He kind of shook and he went onto his knees and he started shaking and all sorts. And he sort of said, unfortunately, the gift is there, but it won't be accepted in traditional sort of spiritualist churches the way you're working. And his best advice was, explore it, go with it if necessary. It's up to you if you want to adapt it to fit a particular mold. But it's that thing, isn't it? Not everything falls into a box, and Glynn was very much about being out of boxes. He didn't like
Yeah,
labels. He
yeah,
didn't even like really being called a spiritualist. He felt it should be more integral, more inclusive, more holistic, and multifaceted, and so on. It might well be, as I say, someone said something stupid, and as you say, Laurie, sometimes you've got to just walk away from that person. um, doesn't mean to say they're all stupid.
no, and that's it.
They're all saying silly things or being closed-minded or whatever. Glynn worked at the college for years and was an SNU media. Gordon was always more, about various traditions, yogis, and teachings of Jesus, and so on, and etc. etc.
Yeah. And like all things, you did touch on the topic of energies earlier on in part of the talk, and I'm very
Yeah.
into my energies and understanding them. And one of the easiest basic lessons about these energy things is if, where we've got a couple of people saying they've been rejected from certain places because of their religion. Well, every transaction is a two-way thing. So you've approached that place, you've asked for whatever, they've said with the conditions, no. On the energetic level, you've done your part. You've given that over and it's been rejected for whatever reason. And it's fine because, when we hold on to these things, we just keep sort of like
Mm-hmm.
keeping the fire burning, and we should just let it go and just go, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let it,
It,
just let it
yeah,
go.
don't let it put you. It's rather like Hillary, who was with us on the Green Spirit talk.
Oh, yeah.
She goes. There's a local church she goes to and sings in their choir, and they put on concerts and so on. And it seems a lovely church, but when she first started going, I think she told the priest, that she was interested in tarot, and and kind of this, celebrating the seasons and so on, and pretty much told that she was a witch and shouldn't be going to the church or something. It's just crazy. You get these people in all traditions who are just closed-minded. Back, their brains are still back in the dark ages. They don't realize we're in a different time now. I mean, even and I'm sorry to say that Arthur Finley's books are very much a product of their time, and they're an influence on some people within SNU spiritualism, because he's very sort of damning of Christianity, and and that was probably right to say some of the things he did at that time. But we're 60 years on or more since then, and progressive Christians are in a very different place. And I think this thing of I'm right, you're wrong, or using whatever your tradition to bash someone else's, this is not the way to go, as any thinking, mature spiritual traveler will know, of course.
Yeah. Just to very, very quickly finish off that topic, Jennifer's just made a comment. Yeah, I fully understand what you're saying, Jennifer, from your point of view. People should accept everybody's faith, but the simple matter is we don't. And this is part and parcel of this life, and it puts obstructions in our way and how we deal with it. It is part and parcel. So, yeah, I fully agree with you, Jennifer. I fully agree with you. Sadly, it continues. Anyway, the lovely Mark Stone put a wonderful comment in. So Glynn always was and continues to be great inspiration for us all in our spiritual unfoldment. And he's just saying, thank you, Steve, for this wonderful presentation together and sharing your experiences with Glynn and us.
Oh,
With us.
thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah. Well, Mark's a great exponent. He was obviously, Glynn was his main tutor, and yeah, he's never forgotten that, of course. You know what we didn't mention as well, really, it was Glynn's sense of humour as well. It was very much known for having a great sense of humour. You know.
Now, I I think it was from you that I heard this story on the Green Spirit night about on holiday up in the Lake District with Gordon Higginson and seeing a couple from the hotel and Gordon giving this reading of them because they were talking about. Was this from you?
I do actually remember. I don't remember telling that, but that was something I saw happen when we were at the lakes. There was maybe it was from Glynn. You heard it. There was a young couple, obviously, you know, newlyweds or whatever, and we were. It was a place where you got a nice view. You know, you parked your car and you saw this lovely panoramic view. You know, and we were kind of you know, a good few yards away from them. We weren't next to them, and Glynn said, noticed Gordon looking at them, and he laughed. He said, "You're tuning in," and Gordon giggled as well, and he turned around. He said, "Yes," he says, it's a lovely energy, you know, because he was tuning into the love they had for each other. You know, interesting. He could do that, you know. Yeah. I mean, there were things like Glynn, and good. There's apparently there was Gene Matheson was telling me once that Gordon phoned her, and it was so fairly early in the evening, but he sort of said, "What are you doing in your night dress?" So, and he knew, you know, and Glynn was like that. When I first met him, you know, he came to the flat I had, different place to this one, sat on the sofa, and he said, "You've been meditating here." So I said, yeah. He said, "But very recently, and here," you know, pointing to where he was sitting, as he knew instantly. He could tell by the energy where he was sitting. You've been here meditating very recently, you know, we're in the last half hour. So, yeah, I had. He was pick these things up, you know.
Lovely.
Incredible, really. Yeah.
Absolutely lovely. Stephen, it's been absolute joy this evening with you. Thank you so much. You really have got a radio voice. You really want to explore that option.
Well, me, like most people, I can't bear to hear the sound of my own voice. I don't know.
No,
It's
it's lovely. It's very soothing, and yeah, I was very into that. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank
Thank
you for inviting me to come and do
Oh,
this one.
absolute pleasure. It's a long time in the planning, but we got here eventually. So that's
And
a wonderful.
we said we'd do one next year about the Realms book, which Glynn
Yes,
asked to be
indeed.
written. So yeah, that'd be interesting
Yeah.
to do that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got quite a few things penciled in for next year. I really because it's like 2 weeks away now, isn't it, or something horrible?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I
So
really need to
you
sit
know,
down and
whenever.
organise this.
No, well, you know, if you think it'd be a nice thing to do, then you know, pencil
I
it in whenever. You know.
definitely. I'm very, very keen. You know, it doesn't need explanation. The reason why we're doing these things is awful. So please don't misunderstand my energies. But what is coming out of it is absolutely quite amazing. And education is so paramount. You know, to learn more about different aspects of spirituality, all different aspects of this world is a wonderful thing because it's through knowledge that we learn to grow, and it's also through knowledge that we learn to not fear. That was came through in a prayer last night. When I said it, I thought, "Oh, I like that."
Mm.
Thank you.
I think
Yeah,
it's also interesting some of the comments. You know, people finding people they're not clicking with. Obviously, it's about community as well. Finding
yeah.
the people who do support you in the path that you're following. That's the point, isn't it?
Indeed. And when, you know, and part and parcel of this life, next life, the whole life, is how we handle differences. You know, and it's just a lesson. And if it keeps coming up, then maybe we need to work a little bit more. And I speak from experience on that, so don't think anybody I'm taking any high-handed approach, because no, most certainly not. Mr. Argument here. Lovely comment from Tim. Good evening, Tim. Didn't know you were online. Nice to see you. Glynn was my main tutor, and I truly believe he was the best tutor and medium of his time. I've never seen anybody be able to read spiritual energy like clean.
Like clean, like Glynn, maybe.
Yeah, I think autocorrect is.
Well, we'll certainly get some interesting ones. Yes, like
on
Glynn,
the comments thing, that when they put the subtitles in, when you're talking, you get the subtitles come up automatically.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The other day, somebody said, "Well, yes, they did test me, and then my dolphin had lunch," and I'm like,
"Okay, yes, yes." And what have you been taking? You know, what are you on?
Yeah, lovely comment, Tim. Thank you very much, sir. Stephen, you've done a marathon effort tonight. Thank you. It's been really appreciated. I know it's been very popular. I have a little counter here of the viewers, and it's just stayed there. Yeah, people have stayed on and listened. Sadly, at the moment, with so much going on the internet, you see them flip. But we didn't have any flitters tonight. And also, the beautiful thing is we're creating this wealth of different broadcasts that we're doing in our YouTube channel and also on our church Facebook page, that people can go back to at any time and review or listen to the first time. So it's quite an amazing thing. You know, we're just building up this electronic library, and we've got so many varied topics. I do suggest people visit the YouTube page once in a while and flick through, because they are all categorized in there. So, any final words, Stephen, sir?
No, other than it's been lovely seeing you again. Thanks for inviting me on to do this talk. I should say it wasn't my idea to do it. You approached me, so yeah, it was a pleasure to do. It was hard in a way to do, you know, because it's a bit, you know, I got to do it. It meant reflecting back on times with Glynn, you know. So yeah, it's done out of love, really, you know.
Yeah, and you did him proud. You really, really did him proud. Everybody's agreeing on the side. They've absolutely enjoyed it, and there's names there that were in at the beginning. So we know you've really held the audience tonight. So well done, absolutely beautiful.
That's nice to know. Thank you. Well, you take care. Lovely seeing you. You're looking well.
Thank you. I'm just going to do a quick run through what we've got coming up online and within the church here at Poole. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we have our live service being held here within the church. Doors open 2:45 for 3 o'clock prompt start, and we have Alan Jeff Potts taking the service. We also stream our services to view only online, and that'll be on the Facebook page at 3 o'clock. And we will have sound this time. Sadly, Wednesdays we were having electronic demons, and there was no sound. Anyway, moving on. Monday night, 7 o'clock, we have an online meditation. Anybody local to the area, we have an evening in partnership with Scania Price, who will be holding a gong bath here. Tickets are limited, but I believe there are 2 left, and you can find those by going to Scania Price, either on Facebook or on the internet. Wednesday, 3 o'clock, we have a live service again here within the church, and we have David and Irene Jackson will be taking that service. Doors open 2:45, service starts 3 o'clock prompt, and that will also be streamed live on our Facebook page. Saturday night, we have a Zoom evening with Susanna Vigda. She's making a very welcome return. She was here a couple of weeks ago, and it wasn't one of our best broadcasts, so we'll just draw a line under that. But she'll be talking about her work with the Crystal Compass. So Susanna will be joining us live from Denmark on Saturday the 19th. And then an added extra, the church will be open for a service on Christmas Eve. That'll be 3 o'clock till 4 o'clock. There are tickets on Eventbrite. You can find it through the church events page. I'm making it a ticket service. We've not turned anybody away this year, but I really do not want the last service of the year where I'm having to stand on the door saying, I'm really sorry, you can't come in. So, so to negate that risk, tickets are available. Service will be 3 till 4, and Mark Stone has very kindly volunteered to take that service. How wonderful. I was sat there thinking, shall I do this? I need a medium. Who shall I get? And just as I thought that, Mark Stone posted something on Facebook. I went, oh, thank you. So that'll be lovely. 3 to 4 on Christmas Eve. We're going to have some carols that you can join in with as well on Christmas Eve. We can't sing indoors. Don't go there. We can sing outdoors. So I will be setting up a little sound system out in the front of the church. There'll be no parking in front of the church that day, apart from the medium, obviously. But we will be able to sing outdoors, socially distanced. I've already got the playlist. I've printed off the hymn sheets. If you are here for the service and you wish to join in, obviously wear something a bit warm, unless it's pouring down with rain. I'll even have the laptop out there so we can stream it live and just get everybody singing because it's Christmas. All right. That concludes the notices. Stephen, sir, absolute pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
My pleasure, obviously. You're doing a great job. So keep up the good work.
I'm going to have to train somebody else up to do this as well.
Perhaps we can get you cloned.
Oh, God, no. Oh, one of me is more than enough. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you all those people who will be watching at a later date. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful, peaceful night. And do what I always say. If you can control it, take it in and be part of you. If you can't control it, let it go. Good night, everybody.